My name's David Halliwell. I'm going to be your opening presenter. I think Dominic's going to MC the day for us. I work with the Science, Engineering and Built Environment here at Deakin, and you'll see my role in just a moment. Before we get underway, I'd just like to do the acknowledgement of the country. So I'd just like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations, whose land we're meeting on today. I'd certainly like to pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging, and welcome any Indigenous people that are in the room with us today. So I'm here to kick things off and to really introduce the day, and so I'm certainly not the transport or infrastructure expert. I was just telling someone outside, my background's chemistry, hang around with a lot of engineers, so you pick up a little bit of that, and a few biologists working in the water industry as well. But there's certainly more people on the subject matter that will talk to the topic today. But what I'm going to do is provide a bit of context as to Deakin, a little bit of context around industry engagement at Deakin and how the university has made a really strong commitment to engage with industry broadly, and I use that term very broadly to represent government, private sector, the not-for-profit sector, and just to introduce some of the capability we have in this area, but I know others will do that more thoroughly through the day. So my role with the faculty is around industry partnerships, and so I'll just throw it out there right now that if you're ever unsure of who to reach into at a university, at Deakin, that is, please feel free to give me a call or drop me an email. I'll make sure you land in the right place. So what I wanted to do was just talk about a couple of slides about Deakin. So apologies to the Deakin people in the room, but to everybody externally. Deakin's been on a really strong rise over the last sort of decade or so. I mean, it's been quite amazing under Jane's leadership. And so we're now in the world's top 1% of universities, so there's about 30,000 universities globally, if you're not aware, which puts us about 212 in the world. And so we're ranked in the top 50 of universities under 50 years of age. Number one for student satisfaction the last 8 years, so we're very proud of that. And our Vice-Chancellor, Jane Den Holland has just left us. Our former Vice-Chancellor always sort of says students are our true north, and they certainly are. And there's really only two parts of the core business of the university, and that's education and research are the two pillars of what we do. And 100% of our research is ranked what we call ERA 3, 4 or 5, which is at or above world standard, which we're very proud of. And we are quite a comprehensive university across the 4 faculties of health, business and law, arts and education, and then science, engineering and built environment. And so the School of Architecture and Built Environment, who are hosting you today, sits within the Faculty of Science, Engineering and Built Environment. So Deakin is now about the 6th largest university in the country. We've got 4 physical campuses. Warrnambool, we've got a small number of students there, less than 1,000. Geelong, we've got 2 campuses at Waterfront, which is where the School of Architecture is based. I think it's about 3,000 or so students at Waterfront. Warn Ponds campus, which is our technology hub, and I'll show you a slide of that in a moment. I think we've got about 10,000 or so students at Warn Ponds. And then Burwood campus, where there's about 27,000 or so students there. But our fastest growing campus is the Cloud campus, so online learning. More than 14,000 students in the Cloud campus, and it's growing quite significantly. So over 61,000 students at the university now, just less than a quarter of those are international students, and roughly 5,000 staff across the university. And so our LIVE strategy, which has been the one that's held us in good stead the last few years and runs out to 2020. And for those that don't know, our new Vice-Chancellor, Ian Martin, officially started on Monday this week. And so saw him present for the first time yesterday, and he's reinforced the fact that this strategy will remain through till the end of next year, and indicated that then there'll be a new strategy put in place by the executive team post-2021. But just to point out the 2 areas that are most relevant to us today. One is around the ideas, making a difference through world-class research and innovation. And the other one is around the value, which is around strengthening our communities, enabling our partners and enhancing our enterprise. So they're really the 2 that are at the core of our research. But of course, the last one around experience, we use this term, delighting our staff, our students, our friends. And if you're not a staff or a student in the room today, then you fall under our friend category. So I certainly welcome you to the university, and I hope it's a good experience for you. This is not one of our campuses. This is our corporate meeting space in the city. So this is just for sort of staff only, but it does provide a very handy meeting place for all of us at Deakin, and many of our industry meetings are held here as well. So there are four main research themes at Deakin. Improving health and wellbeing, designing smarter technologies, enabling a sustainable world, and advancing society and culture. What we've noticed recently, so we've also had a relatively new Deputy Vice-Chancellor of Research, Julie Owens, started late last year. And all the signals we're getting now is, bigger effort, more sort of multidisciplinary project teams, more focus around larger thematics. And so we've seen this in the energy space. There's now a sort of a brand, Deakin Energy, and we've got the director of that centre, Adrian Panow, who oversees all of the energy function at Deakin, regardless of sort of which institute or central faculty it sits in. We're seeing this in food at the moment. There's an emerging sort of future food strategy. And we're starting to see this emerge now in the sort of transport and infrastructure space. And so I know Dominic will talk to that a little bit more today. But we're certainly, there's more encouragement for bigger multidisciplinary teams. And we're certainly seeing more collaboration and cooperation across the enterprise, which is really positive. And I guess there's a whole lot of things in there, but just the one thing I'd like to point out in the very sort of bottom left of that screen around employability. So we're ranked number 3 in the country for employment outcomes for our graduates. And, one thing I think universities will be held more to account around employment outcomes for graduates as we go forward. And I think we've put a lot of effort into that space. There's a group within Deakin called Deakin Talent that essentially provides an end-to-end recruitment service. And so if you're a potential employer in the room, I'd really encourage you to tap into that. There's no cost to you at all, and it really does provide a very comprehensive service to help find our graduates jobs, but also help you in the process. And that includes if it's an international candidate that you're after, helping out with visa requirements and those sorts of things as well. So just to make you aware of that, and it's an area that we put a lot of focus in. I guess we'd also encourage advice back to us about teaching in emerging areas, and this is one of the reasons where research and education overlap, where, hopefully if we're working on current industry problems, that's feeding back into the teaching program, so graduates are getting current knowledge in what they're learning. So this is where my knowledge falls off a cliff a little bit, but what I did do was look at how much spending there's going to be around transport and infrastructure. If you look at the federal budget, there was 100 billion or so slated in the federal budget. Depending on which figure I looked up online for the Metro Tunnel project, it was around $10 billion. I know there's people in the room that have more expertise in that than me. There's probably a more accurate number, but it's a big one. Victorian government's about to release its infrastructure plan. And yet more than half of these large projects aren't delivered, within the cost or the scope outlined originally. And so there's certainly some challenges around delivering those projects, which, with my researcher hat on, we just see challenge as an opportunity, and it's something that, where we can perhaps collaborate and work with. So I think we'll all agree there's a big opportunity in this space. Where we need to head. And so for those that aren't aware, I'm new to the university sector, by the way. I'm sort of, first half of my career was as a proper researcher with industry, and the second half was sort of more in the research management space. But Deakin's the first university I've worked for, and so I've come into a university system, and you'd hear that phrase "publish or perish" when you're sort of outside of the university system, and you can't understand it, and then you get into the system and you realise that that's really just what drives academic promotion. It's really what drives performance measurement internally. But I guess I try and encourage people to think not in terms of publications as the end game, which for many academics that's still the thinking, but to think about the outcomes. What are the outcomes we're trying to deliver? How can we collaborate with industry to understand what those outcomes are? And then if we get that right and we get a good value proposition around those outcomes, then we get the resource we need to do the project work, and the publications become part of the journey. And that's sort of the philosophy that I feel like this microphone's cutting in and out, but that's the philosophy that I certainly try and convey internally. And we recognise there's a lot of sort of upskilling of our staff that we need to do to sort of get in that mindset. And some of our staff are really, well down that path, and others are sort of still in a very more traditional academic mindset. But if I had to sum it up in the most simplest picture I can sort of put on the screen, industry has a lot of needs, and working within a business, what all your problems are. They're the things that keep you up at night, and that you sort of, give you grey hair and so on. And so you know what the problems are, and we're never going to know what those problems are as well as you. But what we do have is lots of really smart people across lots of discipline areas that can think about solutions to those problems. And so really what we're trying to do is look for the marriage between the overlap of the capability we can bring to the table and the issues that you have out there. So we can't solve all of your problems. I mean, some problems are very difficult to solve, but you know, there's not everything that you need that we can do. But what we are trying to search for is that overlap between, you know, what your needs are and what we can bring to the table, and hopefully we can bring something maybe a little bit smarter or innovative, or something a bit different, new, novel that maybe you haven't thought about. And it's not because you weren't trying to think about it, it's just that we've got 2,500 academics that can think about it, and you've probably, you know, got the number of people working in your business. So so what I did today though was just focus more around that transport infrastructure research area. And I know Dominic's sort of looking at creating this hub within Deakin, and so he wanted me just to flag these few areas. So around the future of transport, around value and benefits assessment, around system mapping and analytics, infrastructure planning and investment, front-end project governance, and around supply chain and logistics. And so that's some of the capability we can bring to the table in that area. There's certainly a lot more breadth and other skills in the background that aren't reflected on my very short, simple slide here. But just to flag that, you know, there is quite some depth of capability across Deakin, across a number of institutes and centres within our faculty, you know, within the School of Architecture, within engineering, within the School of Life and Environmental Sciences in terms of things like environmental impact assessments. And then outside, we've got a number of institutes. So the Institute for Intelligent Systems Research and Innovation do a lot of industry-focused work, a lot of systems-level analysis and that sort of thing. Institute for Frontier Materials around material science, you know, light weighting, carbon fibre research, that sort of thing. And then as you stray out more out of my comfort zone, I'm sort of a STEM person, but once you get out, you know, business and law around the planning and those sorts of things, and even the social sciences, you know, we're seeing more and more work with social scientists to understand sort of customer consumer perception around some of the impacts of change and those sorts of things. So that's where we're sort of we're always looking to sort of be in that sweet spot when it comes to industry engagement. I just wanted to spend a couple of slides just to talk about Deakin's pedigree in this space, because as I mentioned at the start, over the last 10 years, and particularly over the last 5 years, Deakin has come a long way. So if you wind the clock back a few years, about 2/3 of Deakin's research income was from what I'd call traditional academic sources, so Australian Research Council money or National Health and Medical Research Council money, what we call traditional Category 1 research. Nowadays, as well as increasing that quite substantially, 2/3 of our income now comes from industry sources, from what we call Category 2 to 4 funds, only 1/3 from Category 1 funding. And recently, and you may not have caught this article, but if you have an interest in this space, I encourage you to just Google search it. It's on LinkedIn. But the article title was the Category 2 to 4 Research Battleground. And it essentially looked at how universities outside of the Group of 8 had competed in this ground. And you can see over that 3-year period that Deakin had really doubled its research income in that Category 2 to 4 space. I mean, Deakin has put a lot of focus and a lot of effort into doing a better job at working with industry. They recruit people like me that have come from that industry research background. There's a number of other people with my sort of background that are brought into the organisation. But also we've recruited a lot of really highly skilled academics that are, you know, astute at working with industry and just good in that space. But certainly I encourage you to have a look at that article. And then just to point out a sort of campus, we're very fortunate. We've got, I think, the largest university campus in the country at Warn Ponds. And it is really the showpiece for where we engage with industry at a really coal-face level. So we've got quite a number of companies on the campus. In fact, I'm a little bit embarrassed because my slide's a little bit dated here. The Manufutures building is well and truly up and running now, so that's happening. There's a few other, the Carbon Revolution site's been expanded, and there's a few other buildings that are not shown on this. But suffice to say, there's about 2,000 jobs on that campus now, many of whom are industry jobs that broadly divide into 3 precincts. One around sort of health, up in that sort of top right-hand corner on the slide. And then the top left-hand side is really around material science, advanced manufacturing, engineering, those areas. And then we've got this very small emerging sort of food and ag precinct in the bottom left, which is really not much to talk about at the moment, but there's a few things in the pipeline right now where we'll have a much stronger presence on campus in that space as well. So just to let you know that the majority of our relationships with industry are not on our campuses. You know, most relationships are just working with businesses that are out there in the marketplace. But certainly that campus is one where we've got a lot of technology on that campus, and it's a really good marriage with businesses that want to work very closely with us, either through research, through work integrated learning, through a whole range of opportunities. So that's really all I wanted to sort of say by way of introduction to Deakin, I hope you find Deakin a good institution to be involved with. I think there's a lot of a lot of smart people around the place that I think are really engaging and can really offer a lot to business in general, not just in the transport and infrastructure space. As I said at the start, my details are up on the screen. You can always feel free to reach out to me if you're unsure about who to connect with in the university. I'll make sure you land in the right place. I hope you all have a good day today. And I think I've got a couple of minutes if anyone wants to ask me any questions, but otherwise I'll hand over to Dominic. Thank you.